Well, as the fighting between Israel and Hamas rages on, countless civilians in Gaza are dying in the crossfire. Some U.S. lawmakers are against sending more aid to Israel. Here's what Senator Bernie Sanders told Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation yesterday.
I think when General Austin said, you can win the battle but lose the war, Israel is losing the war in terms of how the world is looking at this situation. And I think that it would be irresponsible for the United States to give Netanyahu another $10 billion to continue to wage this awful war.
In your point of view. The Vermont senator also questioned whether a permanent ceasefire with Hamas would even be possible. And Israeli forces are battling Hamas militants in Gaza, with civilians sheltering along the front lines. The IDF claims Hamas is forcefully diverting vital humanitarian aid for its own purposes. Meanwhile, Hamas is warning that no more hostages will leave Gaza alive unless its demands are met. Israel's prime minister's office says 117 people are still being held captive in the enclave. So for more on this, I want to bring in BBC News Middle East correspondent Hugo Bachega. He is following the latest for us from Jerusalem. So, Hugo, what is the latest on the situation in Gaza, both with the fighting and with the humanitarian crisis?
Yeah, so let me start with the fighting, because fighting is intense in three regions of Gaza, in Jabalia and Shajaya, in the northern part of the territory, where the Israeli military says that they are targeting what they describe as Hamas strongholds in these two camps, these two locations in northern Gaza. And in the south, fighting is intense in Khan Yunis, which is Gaza's second largest city. We've seen that there have been new evacuation orders for residents to leave central parts of Khan Yunis, and the Israeli military and Israeli authorities have been describing the fighting there in Khan Yunis as difficult, with battles happening house to house. And this has been a key target for the Israeli military in southern Gaza, because this is where the Israeli authorities believe some members of the Hamas leadership are hiding. This is where Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, is from. And again, the Israeli authorities believe that the Hamas leadership is hiding in Khan Yunis. And again, with these new evacuation orders, we're seeing thousands of Palestinians being forced to flee their homes. Many of them are moving further south to Rafah. And we're seeing that this humanitarian crisis in Gaza is getting worse. Only limited aid is getting into the territory, and we're seeing widespread shortages of basic supplies. And again, shelters that have been designated safe areas by the Israeli authorities are unable to cope with a new wave of displaced residents in Gaza.
And then what of the hostages? Hamas has already said that several of them have been killed throughout this whole thing. What's the warning that we are hearing from Hamas about the hostages? And in the middle of all this sort of war of words, is mediation still taking place?
Yeah, so we had a statement from a Hamas spokesperson this morning saying that no hostages would leave Gaza alive unless the demands by Hamas were met by the Israeli authorities. And in the past, Hamas said that no hostages would be released until there was a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, which is obviously something that the Israeli authorities have rejected. They say that any kind of pause in hostilities, any kind of ceasefire would only benefit Hamas, because it would give time for the group to regroup and rearm and launch more attacks against Israel. So around 130 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza, people who were abducted in Israel on the 7th of October. The Israeli authorities believe that more than a dozen have been killed in captivity, but still more than 100 remain there, and obviously the families and the friends of those hostages are waiting to see any kind of deal that could secure the release of those hostages. But right now, there isn't any kind of negotiation happening. We heard from the Qataris yesterday. Qatar has been acting as mediator in this crisis, and they say that the chances of any kind of negotiation between Israel and Hamas are shrinking because of what's happening in Gaza, because of the fighting, because of the humanitarian crisis right now in Gaza. So it's very difficult to see how any kind of deal can be reached right now between Israel and Hamas for those hostages to be released.
So it's just heartbreaking news. Hugo Pacheco, thank you very much.